million people are infected with the HIV virus, but more than 80% of AIDS cases are found in Africa. Zimbabwe and Botswana have the highest incidence of the disease. 1 in 4 people in Zimbabwe is HIV positive. Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda have also suffered greatly, as have Namibia and Swaziland, where 1/5 of the adult population is infected. But the UN's big worry now is South Africa. More than 1/4 of the population there is expected to have the AIDS virus by the year 2010, making it the centre of the global AIDS epidemic. Our Southern Africa correspondent Jeremy Vine reports from Johannesburg.
They used to rejoice in the belief that they could cure anything. But as AIDS engulfs South Africa, traditional healers like Busi and Lovu are finally admitting to sufferers it has them completely beaten.
They don't want me to tell them that they are ill with AIDS, but I have to tell them there's nothing I can do. Their blood is tired.
Healers throw bones and dice to diagnose illnesses, and the fact that they're conceding defeat with AIDS may just be a step forward. This country desperately needs some demystifying of the disease, and at last some clear advice of the kind President Mandela gave today.
We must repeat over and over again our appeal to young people to abstain from sex as long as possible. If you decide to engage in sex, then use a condom.
Born at the end of this century, Veronica is not expected to live as far as the next one. She has full-blown AIDS, as do 25 of the children in this orphanage in Johannesburg. Their mothers had the disease, gave birth and abandoned them. Today the UN called AIDS the biggest threat to Africa's development, but the phrase sounds impersonal, and what's happening here is definitely not that.
It's very sad when seeing a child who's positive on her last stages. It's bad because she can't take food, she's got sores on her mouth, she can't even swallow.
The astonishing upsurge in new cases suggests public education has failed spectacularly here. It simply hasn't been pursued aggressively enough. Even those who've become totally used to the idea that AIDS is prevalent in Africa may find the figures coming from this country shocking. There is now a prediction that in 10 years' time, the life expectancy in South Africa will have dropped from 60 to 40. As a result, AIDS funerals are everywhere. This one in Carltonville was for a young man called Judas. But there is still much denial. The family and friends here never knew what he was dying from. And while people refuse to speak openly about AIDS, it goes on killing. Jeremy Vine, BBC News, Johannesburg.
The patient and her guest, President Herzog of Germany, who's just begun a state visit. John McIntyre reports.
It should have been a well-rehearsed and highly dignified royal procession, watched by large crowds lining the streets of Windsor. But the pomp and ceremony was suddenly interrupted by the antics of a disobedient horse from the household cavalry, which had broken ranks. Apparently concussed, the trooper lay motionless as his sword and helmet were quickly retrieved by a guardsman, while St John ambulance volunteers came to his aid amid concerns that he might have been seriously injured. Moments earlier, the horse, called Reevely, had become skittish and almost uncontrollable, at one point even backing into the carriage carrying the Queen and President Herzog. They would have been totally unaware of the panic which followed, when the horse spectacularly reared up just feet from the crowd, hurling the cavalryman to the ground as one of the VIP cars crawled past. Later, the Queen, who welcomed President Herzog to Windsor to present a replica golden orb and cross to commemorate the victims of the bombing of Dresden, asked to be kept informed of the trooper's condition. And the German president wished him well, saying he would be writing to him. Tonight, the unfortunate soldier is back at his barracks after being discharged from hospital, and his mount is also unhurt. John McIntyre, BBC News.